In the first week of March 2026, while Operation Epic Fury was destroying Iran's navy in the Arabian Sea, something equally significant was happening in Beijing. Chinese military analysts, intelligence officers, and senior Communist Party officials were watching the same satellite imagery and open-source reporting that the rest of the world was watching. They were seeing the same numbers. More than 2,000 targets struck. More than 20 Iranian warships destroyed. The Shahid Bagheri drone carrier hit at pier before it could launch a single drone. 11 Iranian warships in the Gulf of Oman before the operation, 0 within 48 hours. They were also watching the timeline. February 28th, operation begins. March 1st, CENTCOM confirms the Lincoln was not hit. March 4th, Vice Admiral Cooper says Iranian ships are back in their ports. March 6th, USS Charlotte torpedoes the IRIS Dena in the Indian Ocean 40 nautical miles from Sri Lanka. First submarine kill since World War II. China had been planning a military campaign to seize Taiwan for years, not as a fixed timeline with a specific date, but as a capability window, a period when the People's Liberation Army would be sufficiently prepared and American forces in the Pacific sufficiently constrained to make the operation feasible. Public statements from U.S. Indo-Pacific Command had placed that window as potentially opening as early as 2027. What China saw in the first week of March 2026 changed the calculation. Not because Iran lost. Iran losing was expected, but because of how Iran lost, how fast, and what the specific mechanisms of that loss revealed about American military capability that China had previously assessed differently. The first thing China noticed was the speed of command network collapse. Iran's naval doctrine required functioning command and control. The fast attack craft, the swarm boats, the coastal missile batteries, all of them needed orders to coordinate. The Shahid Bagheri drone carrier needed to receive targeting data and authorization to launch. The IRGCN's swarm tactics, which China had studied as a model for how a smaller navy could challenge a carrier group in confined waters, required coordination that could only come from a functioning command infrastructure. American time-on-target strikes destroyed that infrastructure in the first minutes of the operation. Not gradually, immediately. Before Iran could execute a single coordinated naval action, the network that would have coordinated it was gone. China's own command and control architecture for a Taiwan operation is sophisticated and redundant in ways that Iran's was not. The PLA has invested heavily in distributed command systems, hardened facilities, and fiber optic communications that are less vulnerable to electromagnetic attack than radio-based systems. China watched Epic Fury and accelerated investments in those areas. But the deeper concern was not whether American strikes could replicate the same first-minutes command collapse against China. The concern was what the American planning and intelligence process looked like that allowed Epic Fury to target those command nodes with that precision on the first attempt. American intelligence penetration of Iranian military planning was clearly deeper than Iran realized. The targeting database that enabled time on target to work was not built overnight. It was built over months and years of intelligence collection. If American intelligence penetration of Chinese military planning is comparable in depth, the implications for a Taiwan operation are severe. China does not know what the American targeting database for a conflict over Taiwan looks like. It does not know which of its command nodes have already been identified, located, and had weapons assigned to them. That uncertainty is itself a strategic problem. An adversary that cannot be confident in the security of its own command infrastructure cannot confidently execute the kind of coordinated joint operations that a Taiwan invasion would require. The second lesson China extracted from Epic Fury was about the submarine dimension. USS Charlotte torpedoed the IRIS Dena 40 nautical miles from Sri Lanka. The Dena was 2,500 miles from the nearest active combat zone. It had no weapons aboard. It was transiting home from a multinational naval exercise. The Charlotte had been tracking it anyway. The United States Navy's attack submarine force operates in near-permanent forward deployment throughout the Indo-Pacific. American submarines transit the South China Sea, operate in waters adjacent to Chinese naval bases, and maintain surveillance of Chinese naval movements as a matter of routine. China knows this. What the Charlotte's action against the Dena demonstrated, in terms China could not dismiss, is that the surveillance translates directly to targeting solutions that can be executed anywhere in the world, immediately, at any time. China's surface navy is large and growing. It has more hulls than the U.S. Navy by count. But a surface fleet that is being tracked by American submarines in real time is a surface fleet that can be destroyed if and when the order is given. The Dena was not a warship in a combat zone. It was a frigate on a routine transit, and it went to the bottom of the Indian Ocean with a single torpedo. For Chinese naval planners thinking about how to move amphibious assault ships, destroyer escorts, and logistics vessels across the 100 miles of the Taiwan Strait while American submarines are in the water, the Charlotte's action against the Dena was not reassuring. The third lesson was about carrier group survivability, and this one cut directly against a core assumption of Chinese Taiwan planning. China's anti-access and area denial doctrine, the strategy of using long-range missiles, submarines, and air power to keep American carriers far from the Taiwan Strait, was built on an assumption that American carriers would not be able to operate inside the range of PLA anti-ship weapons without taking catastrophic damage. China has the DF-21D carrier killer ballistic missile with a reported range exceeding 1,500 kilometers. It has the DF-26 with a reported range of more than 4,000 kilometers. It has anti-ship cruise missiles on submarines, surface ships, and shore batteries. Iran had similar logic. Iran had the Fatah hypersonic missiles. It had the Khalij Fars anti-ship ballistic missile. It had coastal batteries. It had swarm boats. It had a drone carrier. It had a strategy explicitly designed to keep American carriers out of range and to destroy them if they came close. Iran fired its carrier killer weapons at the Lincoln. The missiles did not even come close. Chinese military analysts are not going to conclude from this that American carriers are invulnerable. They are going to ask why Iran's weapons failed. Degraded targeting data, command network destruction, Aegis defensive layers, growler jamming. They are going to assess whether China's own anti-ship systems would face the same degradation effects. And the honest answer, based on what Epic Fury demonstrated about American multi-domain warfare capability, is that the degradation would be severe. American Cyber Command and Space Command were active participants in Epic Fury. The electronic warfare environment that surrounded the Lincoln was not passive defense. It was active disruption of Iranian targeting capability. China's satellite reconnaissance systems, its over-the-horizon radars, its data links between targeting sensors and missile launchers, all of these would face the same multi-domain attack that left Iran's missiles flying toward empty ocean. China has invested far more in these systems than Iran had. The redundancy and hardening are greater. But the gap between what China has and what Iran had is not so large that the Epic Fury outcome can be dismissed as simply the result of Iran being outmatched by a much more capable adversary. The fourth and final lesson was the one that China found most uncomfortable: the deployment timeline. The United States assembled the force that executed Epic Fury with less than 2 months of visible buildup. The Lincoln had been in the Arabian Sea since January. The Ford crossed into the Mediterranean on February 20th. The operation began on February 28th. From the moment the Ford entered the Mediterranean to H-hour was 8 days. A Chinese invasion of Taiwan would require months of preparation that would be visible to American intelligence from early in the timeline. Amphibious assault ships moving to staging areas, logistics, pre-positioning, Air Force dispersal to forward bases. These movements are not concealable at the scale required for a Taiwan operation. The Epic Fury buildup demonstrated that the United States can position carrier strike groups, coordinate with Israel, integrate air and naval and cyber and space capabilities, build a targeting database of thousands of targets, and execute time-on-target strikes within a window measured in weeks rather than months. A Chinese military that needs months of visible preparation to execute its Taiwan invasion is a Chinese military that is giving the United States the preparation time to build a comparable response. What China was actually watching in the first week of March 2026 across all four of these dimensions was a demonstration that the gap between Chinese military planning assumptions and American military capability was larger than Beijing had been telling itself. This does not mean China abandoned its Taiwan ambitions. Chinese territorial objectives regarding Taiwan are not negotiable within the current political structure of the Communist Party. What it means is that the internal timeline for when those objectives might be achieved shifted, not abandoned, delayed, revised upward. The analysts in Beijing updated their assessments. The generals revised their timelines. The military modernization programs that were already funded received additional urgency. Submarine fleet expansion, command hardening, longer-range missiles, improved satellite reconnaissance to survive American counterspace operations. And somewhere in the back of every calculation, the image of 11 Iranian warships disappearing from the Gulf of Oman in 48 hours. Not 10, not 12, 11 reaching 0. China is watching, China is learning, and China is not ready yet. This is Naval Depth. Subscribe and stay with us as this story continues. There is a dimension to China's epic fury assessment that goes beyond the purely military and into the political, and it may be the most important dimension of all. The political constraints on a Taiwan operation are at least as significant as the military ones. China's leadership understands that a failed or costly invasion of Taiwan would be the end of the Communist Party's legitimacy. The party has tied its identity to the eventual reunification of Taiwan with the mainland. A military failure against Taiwan or a successful invasion that triggers a sustained American response that reverses the result would be catastrophic for the party in ways that go beyond the military outcome. This means that Chinese military planning for Taiwan is not just about whether the PLA can seize the island. It is about whether the PLA can seize the island decisively enough and hold it against American response forcefully enough that the political objective is achieved without triggering a counter-response that undoes it. A Taiwan operation that succeeds militarily but triggers sustained American economic warfare, alliance consolidation against China, and potential military action to restore Taiwanese autonomy is not a successful operation from the Communist Party's perspective. What China watched in epic fury was a demonstration that the United States can execute a complex multi-domain military operation with devastating speed and precision, coordinate with regional allies, sustain that operation logistically for weeks, and achieve the strategic objective with minimal American losses. The political cost to the American side of epic fury was low. The political cost to Iran was catastrophic. A Taiwan operation, from China's perspective, needs to impose high political costs on the American side in order to deter sustained American response. China's calculus about whether those costs can be imposed has to account for what happened to Iran. Iran tried to impose political costs on the American side. Iran claimed to have sunk the Lincoln. Iran tried to create the impression in the domestic and international audience that the operation was costly and uncertain. The claim was exposed as a fabrication within hours. The Lincoln was photographed continuing flight operations. The political cost imposition strategy failed completely. China's ability to impose political costs on the United States in a Taiwan scenario is greater than Iran's. China has economic leverage, nuclear deterrence, and a much larger and more capable military. The calculus is more complex. But the template of how American information dominance, combined with operational success, collapses adversary political cost imposition strategies was demonstrated in the Arabian Sea, and China's planners know it. The window for a Taiwan operation that China could execute with confidence in the outcome has not closed. China's military capabilities are continuing to grow. American military resources are stretched across multiple theaters. The structural factors that might enable a successful Taiwan operation are still developing, but the window has not opened as widely as Chinese planners hoped it would by 2027. Epic Fury moved it further away, not closed, further away. That is the most important single outcome of Operation Epic Fury that no press release from CENTCOM will ever say out loud. This is Naval Depth. Subscribe and stay with us as this story continues. There is one more thing China watched in March 2026 that has received almost no attention in Western analysis of the conflict: the diplomatic dimension. The United States executed Operation Epic Fury with Israeli partnership in an operation that required coordination with Gulf states, European allies, and regional partners in ways that China does not currently have the alliance architecture to replicate for a Taiwan scenario. Jordan allowed American aircraft to use its airspace despite earlier statements that it would not. Saudi Arabia increased tanker activity at Prince Sultan Air Base. American forces were operating from Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait. The alliance architecture that the United States had spent decades building in the Middle East, despite all of its tensions and complications, held when it mattered. China's regional alliance architecture for a Taiwan operation is thin. North Korea is a partner, but an unstable and unreliable one. Russia's attention and resources are consumed elsewhere. No regional power in the Indo-Pacific has the kind of relationship with China that would translate into the basing, overflight, and logistics support that the U.S. received from regional partners during Epic Fury. Taiwan itself has demonstrated over recent years that its population is not interested in reunification under the current conditions. The amphibious assault that a Taiwan invasion would require would face not just American military response, but a Taiwanese defense force that has been actively preparing for exactly that scenario. The military lesson of Epic Fury for China is important. The political and diplomatic lesson may be equally important. American power in 2026 is not just its carriers and its missiles. It is the network of relationships and commitments that allows those carriers and missiles to operate from a position of strength, with allies providing depth and sustainability. China is watching all of it, and the timeline is moving further away. This is Naval Depth. Subscribe and stay with us as this story continues.